It's the Underdogs back with you. I'm Jordan Brenner, joined as always by my co-host Peter Keating. Peter, can you feel it?
I'm
Can you
feeling it.
feel the madness?
I'm not only feeling the madness, Jordan, I'm feeling a little feisty. You know why? Because right now is when this stuff crystallizes and we realize that some of the teams we have been following, analyzing, trying to bring to light, trying to hype up because they deserve it, still are allegedly have a lot of work to do or are outside the bubble or on the brink. Come on, come on. This is the time of year where the people who make these decisions have to recognize the great work put in by some of the teams that ought to make the tournament, and hopefully we'll highlight them today.
So if you're not as familiar with us, and how dare you if that's true, but this
Oh,
is where Peter and I make our bones. We've been projecting NCAA tournament upsets, first at ESPN with Giant Killers, and then at The Athletic, and here with Bracket Breakers for, God, it's going to be our 19th tournament now. So we're going to get into...
What is 20th anniversary? It's not silver. I have to get you something next year. I think so.
To get me something every year.
A George Mason T-shirt, maybe.
But we're gonna get into, we got some exciting stuff planned next week. Monday, the 18th, we will be doing an hour-long Bractacular episode.
It's Bractacular. I love it. I love it.
It will air on DraftKings Network Monday afternoon. You can get it on YouTube whenever you like. And of course, as a podcast, Tuesday, we will be doing our regular podcast a day early on Tuesday to help you fill out your brackets. But today, we want to lean into two things. First, later, we're going to take a look at the women's tournament and talk about sort of what our statistical model sees as some value picks to win the championship. But first, Peter, we have a term we coined years ago called wounded assassins. And these are, in the men's field, these are teams from big conferences that maybe got beat up a little bit in their conference season. Maybe they lost 10, 11 games, 12 games, but you don't think of teams from big conferences necessarily as being underdogs, being teams that, wear the glass slipper. But we've seen time and again, double-digit seeds from power conferences, Syracuse, UCLA, Oregon State, make deep runs in the tournament because they have a lot of the same giant-killing characteristics that some of the smaller conference teams do.
Yeah, look, sometimes teams take a little time to gel, or they go through suspensions, or more commonly injuries, or they just lose some close games. You get to double-digit losses, and all of a sudden, despite the world allegedly being flooded with analytics, all of a sudden you're not really in line for a top half seed. You're going to get a lower seed, and those teams sometimes are very capable of being very dangerous in the tournament. And you're right, it's getting more common actually because power conferences are kind of hoovering up more of the at-large bids. So You're seeing the 7th or 8th best teams in the SEC get in as opposed to the second best team in the Atlantic 10. And that means some of these double-digit teams are there to make their runs.
So, Peter, I want you to stay on task here. What we're going to do is we're going to go conference by conference. We're going to talk about one wounded assassin we like and one other storyline that's interesting as the conference tournaments get going this week. Okay, so let's start with the ACC. And our wounded assassin there is the Pittsburgh Panthers. They are a team that has we give an underdog rating. It's theirs is 32.7, which is high. Why? Because they do a lot of the things we'd like to see out of smaller teams. They play slow. They're a top 10 team in defensive rebounding and avoiding turnovers, and they take a lot of three-pointers. In other words, they do a lot of the things necessary to beat a better team.
Last year, all they did was shoot threes, and that was good enough to beat poor Mississippi State by 1 point and then win another game. I mean, they had a great tournament last year, and they're a better team this year. So, yes, Pitt. Now, are they going to make the tournament? They should. They're dangerous, though, but there's an interesting game coming up. Don't they have an interesting game? They're going to have to face Wake Forest from the ACC in the ACC tournament. Wake Forest is another team that I think is deserving of getting in, but these two teams that we're interested in are going to collide with each other, right?
Yes, that matchup isn't set yet, but we assume it will manifest. And yes, so that's the interesting thing, right? Pitt. So just to finish up on Pitt, they had a big win at Cameron earlier this year. Obviously, Duke was down 2 starters, but that does show that they can upset a
Jordan. They beat Duke, so
day.
They should be in the tournament. Yes.
I actually think Wake Forest, though, is the more deserving team, and it's going to be a really interesting situation if Pitt beats Wake. Joe Lunardi seems to think Wake has to win to get in. I don't agree.
Both can't win, yeah.
But I don't agree. Wake is 26th in KenPom, 38th in the net rankings. I've watched them a lot. That is a tournament team. And sometimes I just don't know what we're doing with some of the ways we assess these teams. I'll be disappointed if Wake doesn't get in.
All right. Well, I'm okay with either one. With them just basically having a play-in game in the tournament, but they're both worthy for sure.
Right.
And Pitt would be dangerous.
All right, let's move on to the Big East. First, before we get into our storyline, our two wounded assassins are Villanova, who Joe Lunardi currently has listed among the first 4 out, and St. John's, who he has in the first 4 in the bracket. Again, two teams with a lot of underdog characteristics we like, right, Peter?
Listen, if you watch for the whole season, St. John's should clearly be in. St. John's, after adjusting for strength of opponents, has outscored its opponents by over 21 points per 100 possessions. That is in the top 25 in the country. Also, Joel Soriano, a complete beast on the boards, 6th in the country in offensive rebounding. They build up possessions. Forget the ups and downs of the headlines and the narratives. This is a tournament team, and the fact that it's not recognized as such is kind of annoying.
So it's interesting. St. John's, classic giant killer in like you said, 6th in the country in offensive rebounding. They also force turnovers at an above average rate. So we talk a lot, and we're going to talk a lot next week about teams that build extra possessions through those methods are the teams that pull off upsets. So that's why our model is sort of getting excited by St. John's. Villanova is more like Pittsburgh. They're less risk-taking in certain ways, but they own the defensive glass. They don't turn the ball over, and they shoot a lot of threes as well. The interesting thing, I think, in the Big East tournament is that these two teams may be on the outside looking in, whereas people are already assuming Seton Hall is in the tournament. But Seton Hall's metrics, they're 56th in Ken Palm. They're 62nd in the net.
Right. Interesting is one word for this. This is infuriating is another word, Jordan. Go ahead. Finish. We talked about St. John's being a top 25 team. Seton Hall's barely a top 60 team.
Now, Seton Hall fans will say, we swept St. John's in the regular season, and we beat UConn, and we beat Marquette. So the question is, are those things enough to overwrite an overall more impressive body of work?
Over a 30-game season or a 6-game season? You mentioned a handful of games. We have a 30-game season, do we not? Look, here it is actually going to be head-to-head and interesting, and the matchup is set. St. John's and Seton Hall will meet in a Big East quarterfinal, I believe, on Thursday afternoon, right? So let's see what happens. But I think Pitino's speechifying got all these headlines instead of St. John's play, which has been up or down, but it's always up and down in the Big East because the Big East is a competitive conference. So teams are going to go through stretches of conference play where they play about 500 or worse. Well, that happens. Right. So what? Teams have tough opponents in the Big East. Come on.
Yep.
Give me both those teams instead of Seton Hall.
Let's move on to the Big 12. We identified 2 wounded assassins there in our latest athletic piece as well. TCU right now among the last 4 buys, according to bracketology. Texas Tech is a 7 seed. So what we're saying there is that's not a team that might pull off a first-round upset. That's the type of team that you worry about in round 2, like in a 7-2 game. Peter, do you have anything to add on those teams before we get into our additional storyline? Yeah.
Very quickly on TCU, because they are one of the most dangerous underdog, like you said, wounded assassins in the field. They've gone through 4 losses by 2 points or less or overtime. They're sneaky good for a number of reasons. They're shooting way better than they shot last year. They've already beaten Houston. The average possession length on defense, which is something to watch, can you make opponents play very slow, is 323rd in the nation. That's a stat nobody really follows, but is really key to pulling off big upsets. They are going to be a very, very dangerous killer. Ever since they got Jameer Nelson this year from Delaware, they've been a team that puts huge pressure on their opponents, and I love TCU as a dangerous underdog.
Right. And just to put a fine point on the thing you mentioned about possession length on defense, it's really it's not as much about forcing the other team to play slowly as it is better defenses don't give up shots early in the clock. We know from back in 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns era that the best shot is often the earliest one you can get. So it's almost like the possession length is a proxy just for good defense, that they are forcing teams to work. They're not getting early offense.
Not getting easy or early shots.
They're often having to take a shot at the end of the shot clock because nothing else presented itself. But the biggest storyline in the Big 12 right now, and again, I want to differentiate between when we're talking about a team being a potential upset option, we're not saying they're more or less deserving than other teams. We're just saying that they're likely to do more damage when they get in. But
well, I'm saying they'll be more fun.
Yes. So the storyline I'm watching real quick is how far can Kansas fall? Two more key injuries. Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough are out for the Big 12 tournament, although it looks like they'll return for the NCAAs, but they are struggling. Bracketology already has them as a 4 seed. You know, if this team loses in its first game in the Big 12 tournament, maybe they're like a 5 or a 6.
Well, this may be a sign of things. The injuries are unfortunate, but everything else may be just catching up with them a little because Kansas is not dominant in the kind of possession building categories we talk about. They're not dominant on the offensive or defensive boards. They don't force or create a lot of turnovers, but they're not great at protecting the ball either. They're going to go as far as their shooting takes them, and if the injuries wreck their shooting, they're in trouble. There's red flags with Kansas, I think. I'll say one other thing about the Big 12, which is Jordan. Do you like Houston as a potential national champion? I think we have to recognize that this team in its first year in the Big 12 has been awesome. They work hard. They do everything well. Pick a stat, they'll come out at the top of the list. I'm going to go on record now saying Houston's my national champion pick, even before Selection Sunday, before the brackets. Who can they not beat?
All right. Well, now you've left us with 3 minutes to get through 3 conferences, so we're going to go fast. Thanks for the Houston side. All right. Let's move on to the Big Ten real quick. Wounded Assassin is Northwestern. Peter, you've written about them. Tell us briefly why they're a team right now projected as an 8 seed that could be dangerous against a 1 seed in the second round.
They play extremely deliberately. They're extraordinarily smart. Boo Buie, my favorite player in the country, runs this offense like clockwork, like a very slow clock. And they're shooting great from the perimeter. This year, they got Ryan Langborg from Princeton. The whole team's shooting tremendously from 3-point range. They are going to be dangerous.
And this other storyline to watch has to be Nebraska.
Go Nebraska. Go Huskers.
They've never won an NCAA tournament team. They look like they're going to get in this year. So look, we're going to become Nebraska fans here. If you're listening to this from the state of Nebraska and would like to invite us somewhere to watch with you or to become part of your community, we are pulling for first-time tournament winners. So
we will shuck corn.
Yep.
Yes.
After we finally go to the Iowa State Fair, we will go to Nebraska next. All right. SEC. Wounded Assassins, Texas A&M, first team out according to Lenardi, Mississippi State, last 4 byes. Texas A&M, it's really simple. They are the best offensive rebounding team in the country. A typical possession is they miss a shot, they get their own rebound. They miss a shot, they get their own rebound.
Clang, 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 clang. Yes.
Yeah, they miss again, and the other team, they either score or the other team gets the. It's hilarious to watch, but it's also the exact type of team that we've seen pull off big upsets in the tournament in the past. So they're a team to watch. Peter, you're a Mississippi State fan as well, right?
Mississippi State does not shoot well, but does everything else well. They get a lot of offensive rebounds. We've been pulling for them ever since Pitt clipped them by 1 point in the tournament last year. They're a fun team. They've lost a lot of close games recently. They're going to be underrated. They're dangerous. But you're right. Texas A&M is the one to watch. Texas A&M, 5 quad 1 wins, then looked so bad they've almost played their way out of the tournament. They still may have. We'll see. But they'd be a real giant killing threat.
All right. And Peter, real quick, give us something fun on the Mountain West Conference, which looks like it'll get at least 5 teams in the field.
Look, I just want to put a quick plug in for New Mexico. Boise State's supposed to be an 8 seed, Nevada a 5 seed, Colorado State a 9 seed. New Mexico is 3-3 against those teams. And looking just at how well you've done against opponents on a strength adjusted basis, New Mexico's scoring margin is greater than any of those teams. They deserve a shot at least as much as the bottom 3 teams that are all projected to get in. Go New Mexico. They'd be a threat. Fun Wounded Assassin as well. They're underrated. They're a value play.
So those are some fun things to watch in the conference tournaments this week, in the power conferences. Notice we said power conferences. So sorry, Pac-12. We ran out of time for you, and looks like you've run out of time for yourself.
They run out of teams. They run out of sports. They run out of venues. They've run out the clock on their existence. It's sad to say.
Right. But look, pay attention to these qualities we're bringing up. Check out our articles on The Athletic about what makes a good underdog, and we will add a lot more depth once we have a bracket early next week. But for now, we're going to shift things over to the women's side right after this.